It's finally happening. And unfortunately, this is not a positive it's finally happening. It's a negative one, as the former number one overall prospect in all of baseball, Francisco Alvarez, will be returning to a Syracuse Mets uniform, as the Mets have sent him down to AAA, and they made this move back on Sunday. So a lot to go over today here on Mets Digest. We're going to go over Alvarez. We're going to go over the future of Alvarez, why the Mets made this move, why they sent him down, and we're also going to talk about Luis Stearns and Kodai Senga, the two guys that will be taking over at the catching position moving forward, with, of course, Luis Stearns being the starter. So plenty to go over, and it's only on Mets Digest. I'm your host today, Mike Duda, and you know me, I'm a stats guy. Today's stat is that 72.1% of you that watch these videos are not subscribed. So please do me a favor, do us a favor here in Mets Digest, and hit that free subscribe button. That way we can bring content to you about the amazing. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk Francisco Alvarez, because he is, of course, the focus of today's video. Here are his statistics, career stats, and 2025. And if you think that his 3 home runs and 11 RBIs is weird because all that you've seen is 2 and 10, yes, there is actually a difference. Believe it or not, in his last major league at bat, he hit a solo home run. That was back on Saturday. Of course, the Mets sent him down on Sunday before the game Sunday. So Saturday night, he took his last at bat in the pros, at least for the time being, and he actually hit a solo home run in that at bat, which I think is pretty funny. The Mets had 7 solo home runs that night, also a nice, interesting statistic in that win against the Phillies. They, of course, have lost 9 out of the last 10. It's been disastrous, and I think that's part of the reason why they sent Alvarez down. Maybe, maybe not. But, of course, in that last major league at bat, he hit a home run. We'll hear a lot from Anthony Tacoma today. He basically said this wasn't a reaction move, because if it was, they wouldn't have sent Alvarez down right after he hit a home run. And Tacoma also mentioned that Alvarez had, quote, shown additional signs of life at the plate, including a 709 OPS in June, end quote. Now, a 709 OPS is nothing to write home about, but for Alvarez, it actually seems like it is, because it's above his career OPS, which is something that I just realized, and that's really, really poor. And when you compare that to the OPS of 2025, that's also a significant jump. Now, throughout the statistics that we've seen when we've talked about Alvarez, his OBP has actually been higher than his slugging percentage, but with that home run on Saturday night, his slugging percentage is finally higher than his on-base percentage, of course, with him being a power bat. But these numbers are just really, really bad. He's got 123 at-bats this year and just 11 RBIs. It's been a rough season for Francisco Alvarez, even though the batting average is above, and his OBP is above his career numbers. They're nothing to write home about. 236 and 319 respectively is definitely very poor. And unfortunately, when we go into the advanced metrics, it's not much better. You see the average exit velocity is pretty good. His bat speed is solid, and his hard hit percentage is good. And he can throw out runners, and he's got a good pop time. But other than that, he is really, really poor. Go ahead and look at that strikeout rate, which is the second from above of last on the batting statistics. That's a 27.5 rate. Now, you won't see the percentiles here because he doesn't have enough at-bats to qualify at this moment, but 27.5% of the time he is striking out. Tacoma mentioned this in his article. He said that Alvarez is striking out more than 25% of the time, which is really, really bad. And he also discusses the poor defense. Now, you look at the statistics there, you see his blocks above average is not good. He's in the blue. You can't see the percentiles, but he's in the blue, which is not very good, of course, because blue means he's in a really, really poor state. Red means he's in a good spot. So very bad blocks above average, and even worse framing. And Tacoma mentions this. He says that this is a significant drop-off going to the 8th percentile of framing. The 8th percentile of framing means that 92% of MLB catchers are better framers than Francisco Alvarez, and that's crazy because Tacoma mentions that Alvarez was one of the league's top framers, and that's his normal standard. But this year, it has fallen off significantly, and of course, we've seen a lot of balls get by him. I think it's no coincidence that when David Peterson threw the lone complete game of 2025, that Luis Stearns was the catcher, and it was not Francisco Alvarez. I think Stearns calls a better game, he frames better, he allows less to get by him, and of course, he is a similar, if not better catcher when it comes to pop time and throwing out runners. We'll see that in a little bit when we go into Stearns' advanced metrics. mechanics. But as for now, let's go ahead and listen to the experts. We'll start with Anthony DiComo of MLB.com. I know we're going to mention him a lot today. He says, quote, Francisco Alvarez, the talented, affable 23-year-old catcher who once rated as the #1 prospect in baseball, is going to work out his issues in the minors. So, of course, this is the move that the Mets made. They sent him to AAA Syracuse to go get some work in the minor leagues. And based on the wording that you hear from DiComo here, it's obvious that Alvarez won't spend the rest of his career in the minor leagues. All that DiComo is saying is he's going to work out issues in the minors. So expect a couple of weeks, maybe a month for Alvarez in the minors. The Mets are going to hope for him to go down and to start raking again and to be good defensively and really to get back to that Francisco Alvarez that we had all hoped for as a prospect and as that #1 prospect in all of baseball. And once that happens, I believe that the Mets are going to be calling him back up. But you hear from the higher ups, this was definitely not an easy call, and it makes sense because he was such a hyped up prospect. We'll hear from Carlos Mendoza here, the skip. He says, quote, not an easy decision, something we don't take lightly. So, of course, Mendoza definitely thought it's a difficult decision to make. Now, interestingly, David Stearns did not comment as we go back to DiComo. He says, quote, General Manager David Stearns declined comment on the move. Through a team spokesman, Stearns said he would address it on Tuesday. Now, of course, today is Tuesday, so maybe we'll hear something from Stearns later today before the Mets take on the Atlanta Braves tonight. Again, critical game as the Mets have dropped 9 out of their last 10. Absolutely need to win today against Atlanta. But that's a little bit off topic. David Stearns will be talking to the media today about Francisco Alvarez. So I'll give you any updates that we have on that front. But Stearns is probably going to mention something about the decline. Mendoza mentioned it, which we'll get to later. But there has just been a significant decline from Francisco Alvarez. DiComo says, quote, although the demotion of an everyday player is almost always surprising, Alvarez had appeared at risk for some time. 2 years ago, in his age 21 season, Alvarez hit 25 homers. He took a step back last season and has been even less productive this year, struggling to translate a series of offseason swing changes into consistent success. Multiple hand and wrist injuries the past 2 years hampered his progress. The move was not a reactive one, given Alvarez's homer on Saturday. Instead, Mets officials took a longer view of the situation. Now, when you look at that middle part of the quote, something very interesting from Francisco Alvarez is towards the end of 2024, you saw a statistical decline after a really hot start to come back to the year after being injured. And Alvarez noticed this. He said he needed to make a swing change. He needed to do something mechanically to change and to get better. And he actually decided to push it off to the off season. And with that decision, he ended up getting hurt at a point during the off season. So he really never ended up making those changes. And therefore, in 2025, he really struggled. That is absolutely inexcusable behavior. When you're a Major League Baseball player and you're getting paid millions of dollars, you need to go make a change immediately when the coaches tell you to make a change or when you feel, hey, I need to make this change in my mechanics because this is not working for me. It is absolutely inexcusable that he is delaying those changes till the end of the season. Go make the changes now because you're already down in the dumps. You're already at your worst. Why not make the changes and get better now? So that might have been part of the decision to send Alvarez down. I don't know because I'm not an insider with the team, but I would hope that that at least played a role in the decision to send him down to AAA because I know when I heard that story, I was absolutely fuming because that is inexcusable behavior from a baseball player overall, let alone a Major League Baseball player making millions of dollars. Now, I mentioned that Mendy said that there was inconsistency when Alvarez, and this is exactly what it is. He says, quote, there were stretches where we felt, okay, that's what it's supposed to look like. But then he'll go a couple of games where he's late with the fastball, and then he chases. So just looking for consistency here. It's not easy for me as a manager and for all of us as a coaching staff. Having a player that talented here, it's kind of disappointing. That's how I take it. But it's part of the process, part of the business. It's not the first time. It's not going to be the last time. At the end of the day, it came down to that's what we feel is best for him. So definitely some inconsistency mentioned by Mendoza. You heard it from DiComo as well. But why exactly did the Mets send him down? Well, we'll go back to DiComo for this as he says, quote, for weeks, the Mets had resisted demoting Alvarez in part because of his potential. Remember, he was the #1 overall prospect in all of baseball. To continue with the quote, Tacombo says, quote, but his continued struggles, along with the organization's desire to expand backup Luis Torrens' role, prompted team officials to push the button Sunday. The hope is that Alvarez will have an easier time improving, giving everyday at-bats in the minors versus playing 2 to 3 times per week in the majors. And especially right before the Mets sent him down, it almost felt like it was every other day that Alvarez was starting, and on those other days, it was Luis Torrens started. I was always complaining because I was a big Luis Torrens guy. I've more changed my opinions because of the basic statistics, which we'll get to in just a little bit with Torrens. But I was a big Luis Torrens guy, so I was saying, why is Torrens not starting back-to-back days? It's every time it seems like Torrens will start a game and then Alvarez will start. Then Torrens, then Alvarez. And that's how it was the past, I would say, week, maybe 2 weeks before Alvarez was sent down. So with the Mets' desire to make Luis Torrens a starter for the meantime and for Alvarez to go and get his swing back, get his defense back, this makes sense for both parties. With Alvarez going down, he can now make those adjustments in the minor leagues offensively and defensively that he needs to make. Meanwhile, Luis Torrens in the big leagues can get those everyday reps that the Mets are wanting him to get. So this works for both parties, and hopefully over the next 2, 3, 4 weeks, a month plus, Alvarez will find himself down in AAA and he can come back stronger than ever and better than ever. Now, this goes to the point that Anthony Tacombo makes again, that being that the Mets are actually not going out of the organization at this time to go get a catcher. I was mentioning how you might go and see Jose Trevino from the Reds. He's a guy who's having a great year that I'd love the Mets to go out and get. I mentioned that in the previous video, but it looks like that's not going to happen, at least for now. Tacombo says, quote, the Mets aren't likely to pursue catching help from outside the organization at this juncture. Instead, they will keep close tabs on how Alvarez is performing at AAA Syracuse in hopes that he can help them during the second half of the season. So this goes back to the point that we just made, where Alvarez is going to go down, hopefully for a couple of weeks, maybe a month, and find himself offensively and defensively, and then come up better and stronger than ever for the second half of the season, and then it'll be Alvarez hopefully as the starting catcher once again, with Torrens as the backup. That of course being if Alvarez can really find it and go back to a productive major league player and be that player that was somewhat decent in 2021. He had, or his age 21 season I should say, he had 25 homers that year. Hopefully we can get some kind of production like that out of Francisco Alvarez when they inevitably bring him back up. But for now, it's going to be the Luis Torrens and Kodai Senga show. So let's go ahead and talk about them statistically. This is the advanced metrics on Luis Torrens. I know I've brought this up before in videos, and these are really, really good. Look at the expected WOBA, the expected batting average, expected on-base percentage. Those are all great. He hits the ball hard. He finds the barrel. He finds the sweet spot a lot. He doesn't chase. He's a significantly better hitter than Francisco Alvarez, particularly when you look at the advanced metrics. But when you look at the basic statistics, Torrens is really not much better than Alvarez. You take a look here, a 236 average, 319 OBP. Torrens is worse in both categories. Torrens has a 227 average and a 303 OBP. He also has a 336 slugging and a 639 OPS, which is worse than Alvarez's 652 OPS. He also has worse counting statistics, 1 home run and 13 RBIs and 128 at-bats, and an 85 OPS plus, which is well below league average. So the basic statistics on Luis Torrens, the baseball reference stats, so to speak, for Torrens, show he's really not going to be this everyday player that's going to make a crazy improvement or is going to make crazy success for the Mets. But the advanced metrics show he's got a lot of potential and definitely could be that guy offensively. And on the defensive front, we've mentioned this, he is a way better option than Francisco Alvarez. You're going to get a couple of more pass balls. I know we saw that on Tuesday when the Mets were in Atlanta a week ago, and a couple of balls were getting by him. He had a lot of pass balls, but he is a significantly better framer than Francisco Alvarez, and he's even better when it comes to throwing out runners. He is in the 100th percentile when it comes to caught stealing above average, and his pop time is also great like Francisco Alvarez. So hopefully Torrens can really step it up now in a significant everyday role. He was always in a backup role, maybe every other day player role. Now that he's getting time as the everyday player for at least the next couple of weeks, if not month, Hopefully Stearns can step it up because I think Luis Stearns is talented enough to be an everyday player, but let's see over the next couple of weeks. As for the backup, this is Kodai Senga. Not a lot of at-bats, not a lot of playing time whatsoever. The only time that Kodai Senga saw was when Alvarez was hurt to start the season, and still that was Stearns basically catching every 4 days, and then Senga would get the 5th. That way Stearns could have a day off. Only 29 at-bats from Kodai Senga, a 172, 200, 207, 407 slash, 18 OPS plus, which is absolutely putrid. No RBIs and just one extra base hit, which was a double. When you look at the advanced metrics, there's really nothing to write home about. He's pretty good at not allowing pass balls. He's a decent framer. He has a terrible pop time and doesn't really throw out runners. He's not fast like Stearns and like Alvarez and like most catchers. The only real good thing about him is he's going to hit the sweet spot a lot. Overall, Senga is definitely a backup catcher, and even if the Mets want to pursue Luis Stearns, and let's say Alvarez doesn't pan out, I think the Mets need to go out and get a better backup catcher, because unfortunately, I don't think Kodai Senga is that guy that can even be an MLB backup catcher. I hope he proves me wrong, but at least based on what we've seen, granted it's a small sample size, I don't think there's enough there. So go ahead, let me know, go down in the comments. Do you think that Francisco Alvarez really will go down to the minors and really will improve and come back up as that number one prospect that we were promised? That guy that's going to go and really hit a bunch of extra base hits and is going to be a sound hitter. Can he improve his defense down in the minor leagues when he comes back to the pros inevitably? Will Luis Stearns be sustainable as an everyday catcher? Will the Mets need to end up going out and getting a different catcher in order to salvage this season, which seems like it's almost crumbling at the moment, losing 9 out of the last 10 games? Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Massive game tonight against the Braves. It seems like every single day it's getting more and more important for the Mets to win a ball game because they're really starting to lose that lead. They're still well above 500, but they are not leading the division, and it's getting slimmer and slimmer right now in that wild card. So big game for the Mets. Let me know your thoughts down below on Alvarez, Stearns, and will the Mets go out and get a different catcher from another big league club? But unfortunately, that's all the time I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching as always, and let's go Mets.